You're watching and listening to the Indie Drills podcast. I'm your host, Chad Wilson, owner of All Eyes DB Camp and author of this book, 101 DB Tips. If you don't own a copy already and you are a defensive back, you are a coach, you are a trainer, then I would urge you to go do that absolutely right now. That's over 20 years of experience playing and coaching and training defensive backs, all packed into this book. Literally everything that you would want covered as a DB is covered in this book. The same way you're supposed to be covering wide receivers, I've covered all of the topics that you need covered in this book right here. Everything from playing zone to playing man, playing safety, nickel back, how you should train in the offseason, watching film. Just about every DB topic is covered in here with great insight, not just a tip, but I go into detail, and it is pretty much the Bible. It's one of the best books out here, if not the best book. I'm going to pat myself on the back here with that. But this is something you absolutely should have in your library if you fall into that category that I said. So, sponsored by 101 DB Tips. And I am here today. What are we going to talk about? We are going to talk about some of the moves that have been made and how guys are fitting in to their new places that they've moved to. And I'm talking about NFL football players that have been traded, cut, whatever, have moved teams. We'll talk a little bit about that in the news. We're also going to talk about giving your players the tools. I'm seeing some stuff out here that I really need to speak on, and I'm going to give you both a coach and a player's perspective on that. We're going to talk about pass interference penalties. It's a big part of what we go through as defensive backs, a big part of the game. It's one of the best offensive plays out there is getting pass interference. We'll talk a little bit about why those things happen. We're going to go into the mailbag and talk a little bit about a struggle that a particular player is having, and that and more coming up here on the Indie Drills podcast. So thank you guys for tuning in. If this is your first time here or you haven't had a chance to do it yet already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Whether you're watching me on YouTube or listening on your streaming device like Spotify or Anchor or Apple Podcast, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next show when I pop it out there on you. So, again, appreciate you being in here, and let's get to it. All right, time now for the DB news, if there is any out there, and of course there is. We just went through the trade deadline, and I don't care, what year it is. When there's a trade deadline, there is a defensive back moving, and we had that again this year. And the biggest move out there was finally, and I say that because it was kind of not an unknown fact that Marshon Lattimore and the New Orleans Saints no longer mixed. If you paid attention, knew anything, you knew that relationship was bound to come to an end pretty soon, and it did. So Marshon Lattimore is no longer a New Orleans Saint. He is moving over to the Washington Commanders. The Commanders have been struggling a little bit in their back end. If there's been any struggle for them, they are doing great this year behind their rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels. But they saw a situation where they could probably make some improvements there in the back end of their secondary. They've got great names, so I'm not entirely sure why they've not been playing the way that they want back there. But anyway, they're bringing in a veteran in Marshon Lattimore. He is now a Washington Commander. Oddly enough, Marshon Lattimore has definitely had a great career to this point as a New Orleans Saint. And you know what? The Saints get for Marshon Lattimore, veteran quarterback with great history, a fifth-round draft choice in the future. So that just goes to show you how, defensive backs, corners are valued in the NFL. You don't need them until you need them. And I don't know. I don't know if he should have, if the Saints should have gotten something more for him there. He has been injured quite a bit, so perhaps that played into it some, but whatever the case may be, Marshon Lattimore has changed his address. Also changing his address is Trey White. You remember that guy who was on his way to almost a Hall of Fame career with the Buffalo Bills? Well, if you weren't paying attention, he left the Bills and ended up with the Rams this year. Things were just not going well there, getting routinely beat in coverage. And I think he may have even been benched, and they started putting some other guys in there, and Trey White said, "This is not for me," and got permission to seek a trade, and the trade happened. He is now going to be a Baltimore Raven, and they're going to just add to their lineup of players back there. So you're going to have a Marlon Humphrey, you're going to have a Nate Wiggins, who was the rookie from Clemson, that they've had out there, Brandon Stevens, and then somehow Trey White is going to fit into that whole mix. I'm not sure how, but it's the Baltimore Ravens organization, and they tend to do pretty well with player acquisition and getting guys in and getting the most out of them. By and large, not always. I do remember a Dalvin Cook going to the Baltimore Ravens and not really being able to do much there. The Ravens kind of remind me of the Patriots under Bill Belichick, where they will run corners through there, try to get as much as they can out of them. If they stick, they stick. If they don't, they don't. The Baltimore Ravens had Marcus Peters there for a while. Yes, he did get injured, and he was out the door. There are several names that have come through at cornerback for the Ravens, and Trey White is just the most recent one. This brings up and to mind to me something that I've seen happen over the years. I don't know how much I've spoken about it on this platform, but sometimes, guys, there's a little bit of fortune in what happens to you in the NFL when you come out of college. For guys going to college, most of you get to choose where it is you want to go. You get recruited by 15, 20, 30 schools if you're a top guy, 40 maybe even. And you make the choice as to what school you want to go to, where you think you'll be happy in terms of the city, the coaching staff, the kind of system that's being run, just everything. You get to put all those things into the mix, into the bag, and figure out where it is you think you'd be best, and then you make a choice. The total opposite happens now when you're coming out of college. A team picks you, and it either fits or it doesn't. And if you are fortunate enough to go to a place in the beginning that fits you, you can have yourself a pretty good career. Now, what ends up happening is you get to the end of that rookie contract, and now decisions need to be made. Do I want to chase the money? Do I want to stay where I am and continue maybe for less money? Because, a lot of times the teams will lowball you if they let you get all the way to free agency. And then the guy has to decide, do I want to chase the money or do I want to stay here where things are comfortable? They work for me. But if a guy comes into the league and he has a certain amount of success, he really tends to think that it's all about me. And my game will travel anywhere. I can go be this kind of player that I am at this first team on any of the other 31 teams. And a lot of times we find out that that is not the case. I'm watching this in two particular cases going on right now. One of them is Eddie Jackson, who I will tell you right now is a great player. He's always been a great player. Coached against him when he was in high school, played at Boyd Anderson in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and he was a playmaker there. He goes to Alabama. He is a playmaker there, a guy that they used a multitude of ways at Alabama. He played corner. He got hurt, moved him to safety, no problem. Gets drafted by the Bears and has a pretty solid career with the Chicago Bears. If he wasn't intercepting a football on a Sunday, he was picking up a fumble or forcing a fumble. He was a Swiss Army knife for the Chicago Bears and just was a great player. So whatever the case may be, I don't remember how he left out of Chicago. Might have been free agency or something of that nature. Whatever the case may be, he leaves Chicago. He heads over to Baltimore, and things just aren't looking good over there for him. I routinely see fans, not that we need to pay attention to them because, fans lose their mind for the smallest reasons, and they seem to have the least amount of patience for defensive backs. They just don't think they should allow any completions. Like the quarterback and the receivers over there aren't getting paid a whole bunch of money and they're not professionals. But anyway, he hasn't had the greatest go of it with the Baltimore Ravens. So Eddie Jackson's game didn't travel from Chicago to Baltimore. And it's a very difficult situation for guys. You don't know for sure. Of course you would think it's really all about you, and you are a good player. It's just you aren't always sure if your game at the place that you're at is going to go travel to the next place and you are going to be able to be that same player. And it could be for a number of reasons. A relationship with your teammates, a relationship with your coach, or the system is just not good for you. One of my biggest examples of this was a guy by the name of Nnamdi Asomugha, who was in the perfect system for him when he came out of college, playing for the Oakland Raiders. Talking about a guy with long arms, great man-to-man skills. He was a safety in college playing for Cal, but came to the Raiders and they had enough wisdom to look at this guy's frame and his skills and put him at cornerback. And the Raiders back then, especially, you're going to play press man coverage. It's what they've been built on for years, and they've never really deviated from that. And he excelled in it. If you guys remember, if you were around and you were paying attention, then you were mentioning two names when it came to cornerback around that time. It was Nnamdi Asomugha and it was Darrelle Revis. And to be honest with you, it was Nnamdi Asomugha first, then it was Darrelle Revis. Then Nnamdi Asomugha left the Raiders and went to the Philadelphia Eagles, where they played a totally different system. And now it was a lot of zone. It was a lot of cover four. At first, they tried to let him press and play zone, but it just was not the same, and things did not work out for him there. So Nnamdi Asomugha's game, as rich as it was for the Raiders, did not travel to Philadelphia. And I see this time and time again. So how does this relate here? You know, for your coaches out there that are listening to me, you really have to evaluate players when you're bringing them on at whatever level that you're in. If you're a college coach listening to this, you guys now you can participate in free agency in terms of going into the transfer portal. And it's going to be really important for you to take a look at a player, watch what he's been doing at the school that he's coming from or the program that he's coming from, and really ask yourself, is that going to translate into what it is that we're doing here? So you might be looking at a player that's productive on the field. He has great film, or he has great numbers, 3, 4 interceptions, 5 maybe, and you want to bring this kid on. But maybe you need to go for a guy who has maybe a little less production on paper somewhere else, but what he is doing on film really fits what it is that you guys are doing, what it is you guys do on your defense, because I can't express to you how much the fit means. And on top of that, the older a guy is, the more that is important, because it's very hard. You know, the saying about teaching an old dog new tricks is very much in play when it comes to stuff like this. It's difficult to take a guy from what it is he has been doing to be successful, get to where he is, have the production that he has, and now totally change it into what it is that you do and want him to have confidence in it. So we're kind of seeing that in some of these cases. On the flip side, though, before I go, you take a guy like Deshaun Elliott, who played for the Miami Dolphins, and he was a solid player for the Miami Dolphins last year. He's been on a couple teams now. A solid player for all intents and purposes for the Miami Dolphins. They don't re-sign him in the offseason. He goes over to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's having an absolute career year. Now, he's a bit of a jack of all trades, kind of as a safety. He can come down in the box. He can cover. He can play on the hash, in the post. He can do all of those things. And kudos to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who do a great job with personnel. That's a well-run organization. If you guys want to know why Mike Tomlin keeps his job, even though he hasn't been in anyone's AFC Championship game of late or in a Super Bowl, it's because it's a well-run organization. You're just not going to be, unless you're the Kansas City Chiefs, and you can get away with, let me not get into all that. I don't want to take anything away from the Chiefs of Patrick Mahomes and the genius of Andy Reid. But anyway, they're a well-run organization. They just do things right. And so they properly evaluated a player like Deshaun Elliott. They brought him on, and now they have totally maximized his skill set and what it is he's able to do. And if you watch the Pittsburgh Steelers, you will readily notice that. He does a really good job on the blitzes, whether off the edge or through the gaps. I've seen him come through the A-gap and cause problems. He'll dive into that backfield and make plays on the run. Really, a poor man's Ed Reed right now. Now, he continues at it. He can really move into that stratosphere if he can continue to stack year after year like this with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But you'll see him covering in the slot. You'll see him playing off the hash. He's doing a lot of things for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And whereas he was just kind of running on the fringe of being a really good player at some of these other stops that he's been at, he's now in the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, playing on their defense, and they are using this man the right way, and they're getting the most out of him. So really good to see that. So that's an example of the flip side happening. Really a good evaluation of a player and how he fits into our system. He fits exactly what it is that the Steelers were looking for. They were looking to put Minkah Fitzpatrick more back into the post and off the hash to kind of read and go use his playmaking skills there and kind of, give a little more longevity to his career, and find a guy that could get down there and do the dirty work, which is the blitzing, coming off the edge, supporting the run, and, being a little closer to the line of scrimmage. That's kind of something that they wanted to take Minkah Fitzpatrick away from, and they have found their guy in Deshaun Elliott. You take that versus what we saw happen with Trey White when he leaves Buffalo and goes to Los Angeles, or, what we've seen with some other guys in the past. I talked about Eddie Jackson, where there's just not a fit there. Your skill set doesn't fit exactly what it is that you're doing there. So, great examples there. And it's just something for teams and guys to pay attention to as they go along down the road. All right, that's going to segue nice into the next thing that I want to talk about you guys here on the Indie Drills podcast. And this is more of something towards the coaches here. But if you're a player, you're really going to feel what it is that I'm talking about here. So, stay in here. You're going to really like where I'm going with this. And that is giving your players tools for them to use when they're in game situations. There is nothing worse as a player than to be out on the field trying to execute defenses and play calls that the DC is sending in, and you feel like you just don't have the tools to get the job done. This is, similar to, I guess, like being on a job site as a construction worker, and you've got to put a screw into a wall, and all you've got is a hammer, or you need to pound a nail into the wall, and all you have is, a pair of pliers. You got to have the tools to get the job done. So, I'm watching some of these games in college football yesterday, and I'm watching safeties being put in man-to-man situations, and it's clear to me as they are trying to cover, they do not have the tools to execute that man coverage. I'm watching guys playing in zone coverages, and they're just not communicating. I'm seeing various situations where, calls are being made defensively. Certain coverages need to be played, and the guys just don't have the tools to get the job done. One of the hardest things for me to watch is, like I said, with the safety, having to cover a speedy wide receiver that's lined up either at the number 2 or number 3 spot. He's coming off the ball at him full speed, and that safety has no clue what to do. He's flat-footed. He's trying to catch him at 9 or 10 yards, or he pedals a couple steps and then he opens right away, giving the wide receiver a free run to whatever route it is he's running, or the receiver attacks his blind spot and now the safety is spinning around and he eventually ends up wide open. And it's typically in a crucial spot because that's when a lot of DCs want to call a man-to-man coverage, and it's just not really fair to the player. One of the biggest things that I've noticed in college football, even in the pros as well, but, in the pros, you have a little bit more control on trying to get your skill work done. It's really, really on the player to get these things done, and you've got money, you've got time in the offseason to get all these things done. And, hey, I don't mind making a living having these guys come to me and get them up to date on their skill work. But when you're a college football player, it just really, I've noticed, and this has come from also talking to players when they come and train with me, when I start asking them about what do their individual periods look like, how much skill development work do they get done both in season and off season. And it's amazing to me how little of that gets done, how short the indie periods are. They're 10 minutes long, or even if they're 15 minutes, you only get 2 of them during the week. It's a recipe for failure out there for you coaches. If you got guys in high school and this is how you're running things, your indie period's 5 or 10 minutes long, or if it's even longer, but you have tasked the defensive back coach with using a part of that indie period to go over your scheme, I promise you long-term, this is not the best thing for you to do, especially in high school, because a lot of these players in high school, when you're playing defensive back, are coming from a different position. They're coming from running back. They're coming from wide receiver. They may have been a linebacker in Little League that didn't continue to grow. So now they're, of a defensive back size, but they're training up to this point or just playing. I don't want to say training because maybe you don't get training, and it's really not. I don't really advise a bunch of training when you're, a youth anyway. You should play a bunch of sports. Whatever the case may be, all you just really have at that defensive back position is an athlete, and you've got to mold him into a defensive back. And the way to do that is not throw a whole bunch of schemes at him and have him play a whole bunch of different coverages, and he doesn't have the tools to play. He can't backpedal. He can't press effectively. He doesn't know how to weave. He doesn't know how to open his hips. He can't make a full turn on a guy running deep. You're putting a guy on the construction site to build a house, and all you're giving him is a screwdriver to build a house. You cannot get mad later when you come back and the house is not built, or you open the front door and the front door falls down in front of you and the light fixtures falls down into the middle of the living room and the windows are put in crooked. You can't be upset about that. You did that as the coordinator. You did that as the coach. You've got to develop these guys' skills. And so I would say this to a lot of the defensive coordinators that are out there, because I've been in these shoes. When I first got on as a defensive coordinator, it was about me being a genius, coming up with all these great schemes that will fool the offense, that will totally throw them off, and I'll look like a genius, and my guys will be able to make a bunch of plays. That was the thought process. It really was more centered around me, coming up with funky little things that I could throw at the offense and really screw up the guy across the way that's calling the plays for the other team. As I matured as a coach and really started getting feedback from players and really started paying attention to what is actually happening in front of me, I realized I need to run less. I need to cut down some of the coverages and stuff that I'm running, cut down a little bit more on the scheme, and give myself and the coaches a little more time to have guys develop the techniques to operate within the play calls that I make. So if you're a team that's going to be heavy on press man, and that's going to be a majority of what it is that you want to do, you have to give your coach significant time to continue to first develop the skills that they're going to need for press man, which of course, yes, is technique. Have them have great eyes. They've got to have great feet. They've got to be able to make plays on the ball. They've got to be able to maintain good position on receivers once they exit the line of scrimmage, because yes, the receivers are going to exit the line of scrimmage. You're not going to teach your guys press and they're just going to jam everyone up at the line of scrimmage. And if they don't, well, the DB coach is not doing his job. No. These guys nowadays get really good at releasing off the line of scrimmage. So you're not jamming everyone up. You're only going to jam up a virgin wide receiver or someone who just is not really serious about it. And the ball probably is not coming to that guy anyway. So they are a multitude of skills that they've got to first develop, and they must continue to work on a daily basis. I will say this until the cows come home. Playing press man coverage is just like hitting a baseball. And a professional baseball player, college baseball, anyone serious, playing serious baseball, is not going to just hit for 5 to 10 minutes a day. They're not going to spend very little time on that skill, seeing a ball, hitting the ball. They're going to spend a whole bunch of time putting a ball on a tee, hitting the ball off the tee, doing soft toss, doing batting practice. There's a lot of skill development and repetition that is needed for them to hit that ball. It's the same thing playing press man. On a daily basis, you've got to train the eyes, retrain the eyes, keep the eyes in the right place, keep these guys' feet moving in the right direction. You start skipping days and cutting down time on them doing that, they're not going to have that skill sharp when they get into the game. In terms of backpedal, I hear a lot of coaches saying, look, I don't even bother teaching guys backpedal. They're not good at it. It's because you're not spending enough time with it. First, learn how to teach them that effectively, and then you've got to have that be a part of your practice every day. If you're not, I'm talking to my DB coaches out there, if you're not getting enough time in your individual period to go over that skill, and you guys are going to be playing off a lot, if it's something you're going to do, you're going to play a lot of zone, you're going to be playing a lot of off man, you've got to somehow find some pre-practice time or some post-practice time to have these guys go over that skill. Even if you devote a full 5 to 10 minutes on just that. All right. Let's say you're pressed for time and these guys don't really have a ton of time after practice. Then you're just going to work on that one skill. I was at a place that most of what we were doing was playing press man. So I told these guys after practice, we are going to work on this one skill. You guys are. All right. I showed them the drill. It's something that I run called 3 releases, and said, you guys will spend the 10 minutes after practice before you've got to move on and go do something else, whether that is catch the bus or your ride is here or go to study hall, whatever the case may be. Spend your 10 minutes post-practice working on just that, because it's a lot of what we are going to do in the game. I need you to master that. And so because of that, This is a skill I needed these guys to master. I didn't go running a whole bunch of other stuff that required a whole bunch of other skills out of these guys. Sure, I might get them in the off season because I'm just trying to develop them in total as a player because they are going to go off to college. But maybe you aren't in a situation to do that. I had a little bit of a unique situation where I could do that. Outside of that, though, if we're talking just for you, your team, your season, if that one skill is the most important thing, if that's mostly what you're going to do, have them work that skill. So you're playing off man and zone, get them guys to backpedal, teach them how to weave, give them the tools they need to run your system. If you're out here running a whole bunch of different things out there, you're playing off man, you're playing zone, they're pressing, they're bailing, they're doing all these things, well, then you better give your coach the time to work individually with these players to run those things right. You cannot pull them out in crucial situations and tell a guy that you want him to bail and you don't work on it in practice. It is malpractice as a coach to start asking guys in crunch time situations to play man-to-man coverage. You don't work on those skills during the week. Don't do that to a safety. Safeties are safeties for a reason. They don't really have corner skills, and you have them playing safety because they're more suited for that. You cannot ask these guys in a crucial situation where you want to run cover 0 or cover 1, and they've got to go match up on a wide receiver that runs routes, catch footballs all day to now cover this guy, do the best that you can, hope the guy doesn't get open. Don't do that to your players. Because whether you cuss the guy out or not, when he gives up that crucial first down on 3rd and 14 or 3rd and 10 or whatever the case may be, whether you do that, whether you go off on him or not, he is going to feel the weight of letting his team down. And the reason that happened is because he did not develop that skill during the week, during the offseason, throughout the season. And you asked him in a crucial moment against a rival in a game where you had to have it. This is for the playoffs. You lined him up in man-to-man versus a wide receiver that has spent infinitely amount more time to do his job versus the safety who spent a total of maybe 20 minutes in the last 5-6 weeks on the skill that he's going to need to go up against that guy. You wouldn't like that. That's like taking an amateur and putting him in the ring against Floyd Mayweather and asking the guy to win. So to my DCs out there and my DB coaches out there, if you guys are running some scheme and you're running a whole bunch of stuff and you find like your guys are just not executing, sometimes let's just really look at it. How much stuff am I running? And then how much time am I giving them to develop, learn, and continue to work on that skill on a week-to-week basis? You'll find a lot of times that you're running too much and you're not giving enough time. You're sending the guy on the job site with one tool to build a whole house. And that's just not fair. So I hope I got my point across there. Trust me, I've been there where you are. I started off running a whole bunch of stuff and realized, you know what? Thinking as a player, I wouldn't like to be going out on the field running a whole bunch of coverages, and I don't have the skill to operate there. All right, time for me to jump into the Indie Drills podcast mailbag, and I appreciate the questions that you guys send in. How do you do that? Well, first of all, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can drop your question right here in the comments section down below. I'll read through those comments, and I'll pick one of them and use it on the next Indie Drills podcast. Outside of that, you can send me your question via email to cwilson@alleyedsdbcamp.com. Again, that's cwilson@alleyedsdbcamp.com. And I will pick one of these great questions because I get a lot of really good ones. And I'll use that on the next edition of the Indie Drills podcast. And you know what? I may start doing some giveaways with that. I might start giving away something if I read your question on air. I think I'll do that. But if I'm going to do that, I'll mention that on the next Indie Drills podcast. Maybe I'll give away a copy of 101 DB tips or something like that. Stay tuned for that. Well, I do have a question this week, and this is a really good one. And it ties in with the whole theme of the show right here. Derek from Indianapolis writes, my team runs a lot of off-man coverage, and I've been struggling. I am not sure when to open, and when I open early, I get beat on short routes. So this is not uncommon, Derek. This is, if you're at the high school level playing this can be very difficult to deal with. A lot of coaches right now have a hard time teaching the skills that are needed in off man. Either they don't have the time, or there could be various reasons with it. I'm not here to bang on coaches. They do a really, really good job. A lot of places coaching high school football is a labor of love. You don't, especially down here in Florida, you don't get a whole lot of money, shall we say, to do that. And unfortunately, it takes money to live. You got to pay your bills and all that. So there's only a certain amount of time you can devote to it. Nevertheless, without really seeing film, I'm going to say a couple of things to you that you can do that's would probably help you pretty quickly. First of all is, and this is probably my answer to a lot of things, is you got to get really good on your film study. You've got to start paying attention to a wide receiver splits. You've got to start paying attention to formations, and you've got to start paying attention to down and distance for your opponents as they come in. And the reason I say that is you've got to start off in this off-man situation with a certain amount of anticipation. You cannot line up in your off-man situation and in your mind, the entire route tree is available to that wide receiver. You can't line up there and think you're going to cover all of the routes in the route tree. You've got to get yourself into a situation where there's some anticipation. How does that come? First thing is the down and distance. What are some of the things that I would expect this team to run here based on the film study? The second thing is now they come out in the formation. When they come out in that formation, now that narrows down the possibilities even further as some of the routes that I'm going to get. And then finally, you're going to notice the split of that wide receiver, and now that crunches things down for you. So in the beginning, routes, just as an example, routes 1 through 9 are available. But you look at the down and distance and you say, oh, okay, it's 3rd and 6. That's going to take a couple routes off of this tree. Now they come out in a formation, and because of the formation, it probably eliminates 2 more routes off the tree. So now we're down to about 4 routes, okay? Because between the down and distance and the formation, out of the 9 possible routes I would get, we were able to eliminate 5 of them. And now you see the receiver split. That might eliminate another route, or it might eliminate 2. So now we're down to 2 potential routes that this receiver is going to run. If he runs something wild, they catch me. Just go make the tackle, line up. But you can't go up there with every route in the book floating around in your head. Use your film study to have some anticipation and cut down that route tree. That's number 1. Number 2 is, if you're playing off man, you got to have a back pedal. And unless your coach is dead set against it, he doesn't want you guys backpedaling, learn how to backpedal. Pay attention, take it seriously. If it's a part of your everyday drills in your individual period, don't just float through it just as a warm-up. I see a lot of guys do that in their indie period. They'll just kind of float through it like it's pre-practice and you're doing karaoke and you're just trying to get yourself warmed up. A small part of your indie period is warming up. I would dare say if you're a really good player, it's not, because you've already warmed up in your stretch period. Or if the stretch period is not enough, you took a little time upon yourself before practice to get yourself loose and then further get loose during the stretch. So now the indie period is more about developing and sharpening your skills and not about you just going through the motions, half speed to loosen up, and you're using poor technique. When you get to your indie period and you are going through those drills, it's to perfect it. I need you to have the Mamba mentality. You are sharpening the knife. You're sharpening the sword every time you go into that indie period. Don't just be doing the drills just to do the drills. So backpedaling is a part of it. You're trying to perfect that. Get your weight down lower than it was, or in the optimal space better than you did it yesterday. Get your footwork better, landing underneath your hips, getting on the balls of your feet. You're doing that better than you did yesterday, than you did it the day before, than the day before. That's how you are going to develop razor sharp backpedaling skills that you can rely on when you're lined up 3rd and 8 in the slot versus a wide receiver that they're trying to get the ball to. Or you're lined up outside, 1-on-1, backside, playing off man, and you've got a highly skilled receiver that they're trying to get the ball to. If you've got trust in your back pedal that you have developed day after day after day, week after week after week, you are going to put yourself in a really great position. Because first is having the skill, and then second is just having the confidence that I'm going to be able to make a play in that situation. and it comes from your daily work. So develop your back pedal. The other thing too is you're going to need to develop a weave. It'd be awesome if receivers just ran their route straight ahead at you and then broke at right angles. We know that's not how that goes. These guys will stem, meaning they will attack your leverage. They will attack your shoulder. They'll kind of come off at an angle off of the line of scrimmage. And what happens to a lot of guys is either they just didn't know how, or they haven't developed their ability to weave. And the moment that receiver comes off the straight line, they're going to open their shoulders, and now they're open, and that means they're not going to be able to break on the football. There's going to be some separation there. They're not going to be able to break on the receiver breaking off the route. That's if they're going in the direction that they're open to. Even worse, if the player breaks to the backside, he breaks to your blind side. Now you've got to execute a whole hip flip to get yourself over there. That's going to be a bad situation. If you're able to weave, you can keep your shoulders square as that receiver stems, and you can hold it long enough to hopefully at the top of the drop, because if you're running off man, more than likely your team is bringing some kind of pressure. They're bringing a fifth man, they're bringing a sixth man, and the quarterback has to get rid of that ball at the top of his drop. If you've got a good weave and a good back pedal, you can remain square throughout that route. When the route breaks off, you can plant your foot in the ground and break, just like in the W drill that you do in practice, and go drive on the ball and, hopefully make a play, cut the route off, get an interception, or dig a hand in there and get the ball out, or make a tackle before the sticks, make it a fourth down, and now they've got a punt. You'll want to be able to develop that weave. And then so far as knowing when to open, that's a judgment thing. Maybe it's 4 or 5 yards. There's a lot involved in knowing when to open. Okay, first is knowing your skill level. That's one. Second is what kind of speed the guy coming at you has. And then there's a little bit of your anticipation in there. Remember what I said about knowing, kind of having an idea of what's coming your way. As a guy comes off the line of scrimmage, all right, you're going to have kind of a clue of what he might be running. And so if the clues when he's coming off the ball is telling you, oh, this route's going to go deep, you can open a little sooner. Now you had to have developed your skills in terms of opening your shoulders, getting into a crossover run and having your shoulder down. So in case you need to break off, you can plant, drive, come out of your breaks. But you're going to have to work on your skills in pedaling and opening. And for you coaches out there, you see all this that's involved just on playing off, man. If you're giving your coaches 5 to 10 minutes of indie period, and 5 of those minutes, they've got to go over some coverage scheme that you got, that player's not, they're going to know the scheme. They're going to know where they're supposed to be. They just aren't going to have the skills to get there. So getting back to what you need here, Derek, you need A, to be able to study film and be able to eliminate some routes on the route tree. B, you need to have a solid back pedal if you're going to be playing off man. C, you're going to need to be able to weave so you can move with the wide receiver on the stem and keep your leverage and stay in contact with his hip so that you can break and be close when the ball throws and arrives. And finally, you're going to have to be able to judge that route and open a little sooner if you think it's going to be deep. And finally, have be able to have the good skills to have a solid crossover run, good body positioning so you can plant and drive out of your crossover run. Seems like a lot, but I would urge you to, if you're not getting these things done in practice, Derek, if it's not a part of your practice routine, figure out a way to get the extra time in, whether it's pre-practice, post-practice. Playing off man is a big part of what you guys do. Devote your pre or post-practice time to those skills and those skills alone, because you're going to need to sharpen them and get them right. Okay, Derek, hope that helps you out. Appreciate you sending in that question. And again, for you guys out there that have questions for me that you want to have read, heard, discussed on the Indie Drills podcast, you can, again, drop them in the comment section here if you're watching on YouTube, or send me an email to cwilson@alliesdbcamp.com. Have no fear. If I don't read it on air here, I will still answer your question. I'll just return the email, or I might answer it in the comment section. But one of these will get read on the next Indie Drills podcast. So thank you once again, Derek in Indianapolis, for the question. And hope this helps you out and you steal a couple in your next football game. All right, moving on to our main topic here on the Indie Drills podcast, and it is about pass interference penalties. As I told you guys in the outset, it's a big part of the game for us. No one really likes them. If you're on this side of the football, it can be terrifying. It could be debilitating, if I could use that word. You're going to have to look that one up. But the pass interference penalties hurt, but it's just par for the course. It's a part of playing this game. If you've followed me, you've been on my blog, if you've done anything in following me on here, I spend a good amount of time criticizing referees for the pass interference calls. No doubt the game is changing, and what you're allowed to do as a DB in coverage is shrinking. However, some of you are racking up pass interference penalties, and it has to do with things that you are and are not doing. So let's cover a couple of those things here. I'll tell you what those things are and give you a little bit of advice here on it. The first thing is you don't trust your technique. Most pass interference penalties start at the line of scrimmage. When a defensive back doesn't trust his press technique, which I talked a little bit about in the show today, he'll often make false moves at the line of scrimmage. Typically, this is either opening up the gate or missing the jam at the line of scrimmage. When this happens, you're in chase mode. And when you're in chase mode, you're not relaxed and you're more likely to make false moves. This often results in you bumping into the receiver while the ball is in the air, or you're face guarding. I mean, we've all seen those things. My advice to you guys that find yourself in this situation, and you got to be honest about who you are. You got to have some self-awareness. Is this you? If it is you, work on your technique consistently. Make your daily improvements. As you improve, so will your confidence. Confidence is a big part of playing defensive back, especially if you're playing a lot of man-to-man. And you'll find yourself in better position from the start. That's simple advice. Work on your game more. Work on your technique more. The next thing is you're scared to get beat. And this is a lot of DBs out there, especially when you're first starting out. All kind of things end up in your head. You start thinking about the criticism that's going to come, or they're going to come find you on Twitter. As I always say, it matters what's in your mind as you're covering a wide receiver. If fear is the dominant thought in your head, your mind, your body is going to react to that. How will it react? By grabbing the receiver's arm as you're running down the field, or tugging on his jersey the moment he makes a break. If you're scared of getting beat, it will be impossible to make a play. Grabbing the arms or tugging on the jersey while the ball is in the air, that's an easy call for the referee to make. I can't even defend that. You guys will start pulling on a jersey and it's coming off his shoulder pads. Can't defend that. You're going to get the rightful penalty. So you got to get that fear out of you, okay? If your coach puts you on the field, that means he thinks you can play. So whether he thinks so or not, you're out there. And your biggest weapon is going to be your confidence once you step out on the field. Hopefully you've been doing all the work that you need on your technique. Hopefully you know the defense and you've studied. Whether or not you have, play with confidence. Run with the receiver. Don't grab on him. When he breaks, plant your foot in the ground and go close the space using your feet and not your hands. Your hands are there to defend the ball when the ball arrives. You got to use your feet to get close enough when the ball is coming to be able to do that, whether it's an interception or getting your hands in there. Use your feet, and then your hands are to be used when the ball arrives. The final thing here is you don't really have any ball skills. You simply haven't practiced catching the ball enough. So you're not confident in your ability to track a pass and catch it. Because of this, you rarely look for the ball. A lot of guys fall into this category. If you're not looking for the ball and a collision occurs before the pass arrives, you can expect to see a flag on the ground. Many DBs think they can get by by just watching the receiver's face and trying to play his hands. You're probably watching this, and that's you. This might work occasionally, but more often than not, it results in untimely contact and a flag. Here's my advice to you. Start spending more time catching the football. Take some time before or after practice, that's been a big theme of what I've talked about today, to develop your ball skills. Be sure to work on tracking throws, getting into position, and catching the football. The more you do this, the less you'll panic when the ball is in the air. You know that feeling that I'm talking about. As your confidence in catching the ball grows, the more you'll want to look for the football so you can make a play. When you're confident about being able to catch that ball, you'll turn your head around instead of playing a guy's face. Turn your head around. You'll see the ball coming. You've done enough catching, enough tracking of the football in the air that you'll feel confident as confident as a guy next to you that's running for it, and you can start making plays on the football. The more you'll do this, the less you'll panic. As your confidence in catching the ball grows, the more you will want to look for that football and rack up those interceptions. If you don't practice catching the football, why would your mind tell you to look for it in the game? Increase your time working on this skill and watch how many plays you make on the ball. Experience has taught me that these are probably the three major reasons why guys rack up pass interference penalties. Yeah, it is easier to get penalties these days. Referees really like to do that, and now offenses have discovered that, and now it's one of the best plays in their playbook is just throw the ball up in the air. A lot of times throw it short. And if you find a guy that doesn't look for the football, he'll run into your receiver and it's a free 15 yards. Or if you're in the league, it's a spot foul, which is tremendous. Throw the ball 40, 50 yards downfield, free 40 or 50-yard play. But the danger for the offense in doing that is if you've got a DB that's confident, that has caught enough footballs, that has done enough ball tracking work to look for the deep balls, and you decide you want to throw that ball short, and he gets his head around early, that's going to be an interception. So that's another good unintended maybe consequence of you developing great ball skills and, now having the confidence in the game is if you're a guy that's going to turn his head around early, quarterback's going to be less likely to just toss that football up short thinking he's going to get a free play. He's going to be in the back of his mind, this guy will turn his head around and maybe intercept this football. So maybe he looks elsewhere or he holds the ball longer, and now one of the big guys get to grab him and, drop him to the ground, and you get a sack out of that. So the moral of the story is work on your skills, whether it's press man, and that's what you guys are running a lot. Work on those skills. Get that fear out of your mind and your heart. Once you step on that field, it's no fear. It's a football game. It's, something you've been playing either for a while, a year, 2 years, 5 years, 6, 7, 8 years. If, you're towards the middle or end of your high school career, it's football. Just go play. Get the fear out of there. And then finally, work on your ball skills, man. I'm telling you, there's so much benefit to that. A lot of times guys that come over from receiver to DB end up being really, really great players that make a lot of plays on the football because they have the skills in tracking the football, and they don't feel any kind of way when that ball is in the air. They feel like the ball is for them because they've played so much receiver. So develop a receiver's mentality when that ball goes in the air, and the best way to do that is to continue to work on catching the football. Right? You guys, again, the moral of the story here, you got to do extra work, whether it's pre-practice, post-practice, maybe a little bit on your days off. You do stuff like that. I'm not saying wear your legs out. Maybe you work a little bit on catching the football, standing stationary, doing blind ball drills on your day off. You're not taxing your feet, but you are working on a skill. You got to put in that extra time. The moral of the story here on the show. All right. Before I let you guys out of here, I definitely have got to talk about this right here. I am extremely excited about the all-new All Eyes DB Camp members area. Launched it last month. Guys, you definitely have to get on board with this. I talked about 101 DB tips. Yes, get this in your library, but you absolutely have to be a member of the All Eyes DB Camp members area. Join that community. It is absolutely unbelievable what I'm able to do in this all-new members area. I could categorize the drills, dropping workouts in there. So if you guys are, in another city, state, whatever, you can't get to me, you can see actual workouts that I do that can develop your skills. I talk about coverages in there. I explain coverages. I break down technique, do live events in there. I could do Q&As. I could send DMs in there. I'm going to be doing question and answer. I'm going to be doing live events in there coming up really, really soon. You're going to want to be a part of that. You can bookmark articles and categorize and organize things in the All Eyes DB Camp members area so you can refer back to them at a later date. And you can do all this from an app. I didn't have an app with the old All Eyes DB Camp members area, so there is an app that you can use. You can download the app and you can have all of this wealth and knowledge and resource right there in the palm of your hands. If you're a guy that lives on the phone, you are being criminally negligent if you are not an All Eyes DB Camp members area and you're trying to get to the top of your game. Whether you're a coach or you are a player, I cannot recommend this to you enough. If you want superpowers, join the All Eyes DB Camp members area and get a copy of 101 DB Tips. I promise you, you'll be an unstoppable force on the field. No joking around right there. I have links to both down in the description below. I can't sell this to you enough. If I had these things when I was coming out as a player or when I was starting off as a coach, I'd be that much better. I would have killed to have stuff like this. One of these days, I'm going to just kind of try and tell you what it is I had to go through to try and gain the knowledge first when I was a player, and then what I had to do when I started becoming a coach to try and get all of the knowledge that I needed. Could have accelerated my career, both as a player and as a coach. You guys have these things right here. It's now been presented to you. Take advantage of them. Invest in yourself. Again, I'll have links to both down in the description below. All right, that's enough of me shopping and hawking my wares on you. I hope you guys appreciated everything that I dropped on this show for you today. Go ahead and drop something down in the comments right there, whatever's on your mind, DB-wise. Would love to connect with you guys. Go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section down below if you're watching me on YouTube. And if you do have a question and you're listening to me on your streaming device, send me an email to cwilson@alleyeysdbcamp.com. All right, that's it for me. I'm out of here. And as always, All Eyes DB Camp. Consistency breeds results.